I was stumbling around on an industrial estate just outside of Manchester in search of two 12-week-old kittens that desperately needed help. A lady called Hayley had sent me a video. She'd been feeding them in the mornings, but this was as close as she could get. They had never had human contact, so were very skittish. One black, the other noticeably smaller, a tuxedo. Originally a family of 5, they had been born on a 20-foot-tall, rat-infested rubbish tip that was next door to Hayley's workplace. The tip was recently cleared away, and in the process, their mother and a sibling disappeared. They were likely killed by heavy machinery, as they were never seen again. Sadly, that reduced the family to 3 kittens, who were left to fend for themselves. Then one of the 3 became ill. Hayley managed to pick up the tiny girl when she became so weak she couldn't walk. She brought her home to join her own cat family. I continued searching the area for the 2 remaining kittens, looking in all the places they may choose to hide, but there was no sign. I headed home after arranging to meet at 6 a.m. the next morning when the kittens would be fed. This time, their food would be in a trap. I set off at 5 a.m. with 2 traps, a tin of sardines and some cat food. I was praying I would trap both kittens. It was high risk, but trapping options were limited because of the darkness. I set both traps and nervously watched from my car while Hayley waited in hers. We waited and waited. And just as the sun began to rise, the kittens appeared. I couldn't believe how tiny they were, so out of place in the harsh surroundings. Holding my breath, my heart pounding, I could just about make out little legs circling the traps. Then the sound I was waiting for. It was still quite dark, and I was trying to see if there was a kitten in the trap without scaring off the other one. Then, wow, just wow, both kittens had gone in one trap. I called Hayley over.
They're both in there? Oh, baby.
Because of her kindness to find them help, she changed the direction of their lives.
Oh, it's so very hard to see you. Yeah, stay still.
I loaded them into the car. I could see the black one was protecting the smaller tuxedo by positioning itself in front. The battle scar nick to the ear told a story. I took my chance to check them over for any obvious problems. They looked underweight with bloated bellies, a little dirty, and the tuxedo had watery eyes. While heading home, I chatted to the kittens to reassure them that better things were to come.
Look at you. Hey? Are you ready? Come on, stay calm, stay calm.
The little loves were frozen in fear. I really didn't know how they would react when transferring them. They had never been this close to a person and had never been confined. I just relaxed and trusted that they would let me guide them.
Lovely. Hey? You going with your friend? You going with your friend? Hey, precious? There you go. Very good. There you go. You two. Be scared. scared? Put that down.
The worst was over. They were safe, even though they hadn't realised it yet. I was so relieved. I decided to bring them to the vet. Normally I would wait until I'd built some sort of bond, but they needed worming treatment so they could start putting on weight, and the little tuxedo's eyes were a real concern. At short notice, I booked them in with the only available vet, not my usual. So off we go. But after a 5-minute appointment of total mayhem, mission aborted. We sheepishly headed home. They were just too feisty to be checked over, pint-sized but wild. Now home, I transferred them to a double pen. I never usually use pens, but it would hopefully make the kittens aware of the heated bed and litter tray. I added Saul so they understood. They huddled together and I just let them observe the new environment. After a few hours, the more forward of the two, the tuxedo, emerges. I see if the little one will accept food from my hand.
Chicky.
Not yet.
Chicky.
To keep a respectful distance while trying to build a bond, I feed them at spoon's length. The black kitten taking quite some time to be receptive. I really wanted to give them both a good cuddle, but would have to be patient.
Let's try get it. Come on.
Now we had conquered feeding, on to play. The tuxedo didn't waste much time, while the black one hid in the box. Eventually, after half an hour, we made progress. I was thrilled. The kittens had been purring every time they heard Madonna through the door, so for a moment I let them see each other. They were no doubt missing their mum. Picasso had his turn. I let the kittens settle for a week before managing to get another last-minute appointment. Another vet, another visit. I just hope it would go better this time.
She lovely.
So, no name, that's what I was asking you.
Yeah, no name yet.
Okay, come here. Okay, okay. Let's see what you are, little one. Oh no, what am I doing? Yeah, I can feel 2 little testicles there. Whee! I'm going to just, so we've got no hernia as well. I'm just going to have a look to see if we've got a planet. Probably not.
All was going surprisingly well so far. Now for kitten number 2.
Let go, it's fine. Let go, it's fine.
It's alright, alright.
I was distracted for a second and the little tyke managed to wriggle free before begrudgingly allowing a complete checkup under the security and comfort of a towel. He was also a boy and again proving trouble was his middle name. Both underweight with bloated bellies from worms, the tuxedo had infected eyes. Back home, I encouraged them out of the pen with food and began patting them when they were distracted. They were obviously ravenous and had a lot of catching up to do. The shenanigans over food begun. Big brother letting his little brother get away with murder. The tuxedo was the first to explore the room and peek at what was beyond. After a couple of days, they started to loosen up. I named the tuxedo Billy and the black one Bobby. If there was ever any trouble, you knew who was behind it. Also seen in Exhibit B. Billy was scared of most toys, so I resorted to string. It did the trick and bored him out of himself. I made sure to tie something to the end and put it away when finished so it couldn't be swallowed, a common problem with cats. Bobby was still very wary. He was the stronger, bigger brother. I'm sure he protected poorly Billy from the threat of rats, cats, and other dangers at the rubbish tip. At every opportunity, I kept trying to pat him to break down the barrier. Billy, on the other hand, was just Billy. He was the baby and enjoyed being looked after. After a couple of visits to my usual vet, as advised, I managed to fatten them up to reach the required weight for neutering. Off we go. I nervously left them for the day, but knew they were in good hands with Ashley Veterinary Surgery. A few hours later, Nicoletta the vet kindly sent me a photo of them in recovery. I was so relieved to be collecting them and getting them home for a well-deserved post-op chicken dinner and a bit of play before bedtime, like nothing ever happened. It took a few weeks before Bobby would finally let me touch him without the distraction of food. This was our first pat. I was overjoyed. I even managed to pick him up, if only briefly.
Good boy. Good boy.
Now they had recovered from neutering and were beginning to enjoy human company, I decided they were ready for adoption. I created the post and stated they were available only as a pair. They must stay together, especially after all they'd been through. Sadly, there was a deafening silence. No inquiries. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. Black cats are the most difficult to rehome and can wait months or even years in shelters. In the past, I had my own black cat. This is Olive. It was love at first sight. I had adopted her from a vet in 2001. She was 1 year old when she was thrown out of a moving car with her kittens. The receptionist took me to one side and explained it was planned for her to be euthanised as no one was interested in her, as she was an unpopular colour. I was upset and horrified. We had 20 wonderful years together, starting in Australia and ending in England. I was determined to find Billy and Bobby a forever home and shield them from discrimination, but weeks passed, and as much as I tried, there was still no real interest. I kept them entertained as we waited. Then the inquiry came in. I did a home visit. They were a lovely couple who lived in the country and had experience with rescue cats, a big house with surrounding fields and a huge garden. Billy and Bobby had finally found their absolutely perfect forever home. A room had been prepared for the brothers, and I was very pleased to see they had shutters, not expensive designer curtains, as Billy had now become quite accomplished. I spent my last morning with them. It's always so hard to let them go. Absolutely painful for me and scary for them, but everything is in place for Billy and Bobby to have a wonderful 20 years ahead of them. Time to get in their carriers. Billy was easy, but Bobby new, and made us half an hour late after I had to dismantle the bed to get to him. In the car, facing each other for comfort, we're off to your forever home, boys. After a long drive,
What's it, you two?
we arrived, and I released Billy and Bobby into their new room. I was really feeling for them. Goodbye, boys. Be happy.
That's it, can you squeeze?
They had two furry friends to look forward to meeting. 10-year-old Charlie, who was a stray who turned up one day battered and bruised. Then there's sweet Molly, who thinks she's a cat as she was brought up with them. She loves to love. I headed home just hoping their fear would quickly subside and that they wouldn't break any of the delicately poised ornaments while swinging from the chandeliers. Their new guardians sent me updates. They appeared from under the bed the next day and settled in a lot quicker than expected. Billy took no time to want to play. Amazingly, the ever-cautious Bobby allowed pats within a couple of weeks. Molly has been looking to mother them. They started exploring the house and have made themselves at home, sleeping on the new guardian's bed. From the horrors of life on the rubbish tip to the high life filled with fun and love, they finally have their fairy tale ending. Like, subscribe, comment. I would love to know your thoughts.